How to silence self-doubt and negative self-talk. Rewire your inner voice to work for you, not against you. By T.M. Light. Description: Unlock the power of your mind with this motivational guide. It teaches you to transform the critical voice inside your head into a source of strength, clarity, and confidence. Learn how to identify patterns of negative thinking, challenge limiting beliefs, and build long-term mental resilience. Perfect for anyone struggling with self-doubt, anxiety, or perfectionism, this book provides practical strategies to rewire your inner dialogue, embrace imperfection, and take confident action. Reclaim your self-worth, improve decision-making, and cultivate a supportive inner voice that empowers every area of your life. Chapter Outline. Introduction: Meeting the voice in your head. Chapter 1: Understanding where self-doubt comes from. Chapter 2: Identifying the patterns of negative self-talk. Chapter 3: Why your inner critic feels so convincing. Chapter 4: Separating your thoughts from your identity. Chapter 5: Challenging the lies without fighting yourself. Chapter 6: Rewriting the inner dialogue. Chapter 7: Building confidence through evidence, not affirmations. Chapter 8: Quieting the voice during stress and failure. Chapter 9: Making peace with imperfection. Chapter 10: Living with an inner voice that supports you. Conclusion: You were never broken. Introduction: Meeting the voice in your head. There is a voice in your head that speaks to you every single day. It comments on your choices. It judges your mistakes. It questions your abilities. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it shouts, but it is almost always there. For many people, this voice does not encourage or comfort. It doubts. It criticizes. It warns. It tells you to be careful, to stay small, to not try again. And over time, you may have come to believe that this voice is you. But it isn't. That voice is not your identity. It is not your truth. It is not proof of who you are or what you are capable of. It is learned. It is conditioned. And most importantly, it can be changed. From a young age, we begin absorbing messages about who we are and how the world works. Some of those messages come from parents or teachers. Some come from peers' experiences, or moments of embarrassment and failure. Over time, these external voices become internal. They form an inner narrator that tries to protect us from pain, rejection, and disappointment. But protection often turns into limitation. Caution turns into criticism. Awareness turns into doubt. This is how self-doubt is born. Not because you are weak, but because you are human. The inner voice plays a powerful role in shaping your life. It influences the risks you take, the goals you pursue, and the opportunities you walk away from before even trying. It affects how you interpret failure and success. It determines whether you see challenges as proof that you are incapable or as invitations to grow. Long before anyone else tells you no, this voice often does it first. Negative self-talk feels automatic because it has been practiced. It feels powerful because it speaks in your own tone, using your own language, repeating thoughts you have heard before. The brain is wired to focus on threats. It remembers pain more vividly than pleasure. It tries to predict danger so you can avoid it. That means your mind is naturally biased toward caution, toward worst-case scenarios, toward self-criticism disguised as realism. So when you hear that voice telling you that you are not good enough, not ready, or not capable, it can feel convincing. Familiar. True. But familiarity is not truth. Struggling with negative self-talk does not mean there is something wrong with you. It means your mind has learned patterns that once served a purpose. Perhaps they kept you from embarrassment. Perhaps they helped you avoid disappointment. Perhaps they were modeled for you by others who were struggling themselves. Whatever the origin, Those patterns are not permanent. You are not broken for having an inner critic. You are not weak for doubting yourself. You are not failing because fear shows up in your thoughts. These experiences are shared by high achievers, creatives, leaders, and people who deeply care about doing well. The difference is not who hears the voice. The difference is who learns how to respond to it. This book is not about silencing your thoughts entirely. It is not about forcing positivity or pretending fear does not exist. It is about learning how to listen with awareness instead of obedience. It is about recognizing when the voice is offering information and when it is repeating an old, outdated story. Your inner voice can be trained. It can become clearer, calmer, and more supportive. But change begins with awareness. Before you can rewrite the dialogue, you must learn to hear it honestly. Not with judgment. Not with shame. But with curiosity. As you move through these pages, you will begin to notice patterns. You will start to recognize the moments when your inner voice becomes harsh. You will learn why it says what it says, and how to separate helpful caution from unnecessary cruelty. You will discover how beliefs shape behavior, and how behavior reinforces belief. Most importantly, you will learn that you are not at the mercy of your thoughts. You can question them. You can challenge them. You can choose which ones deserve your attention and which ones do not. This journey is not about becoming someone new. It is about removing the noise that has been covering who you already are. Beneath the doubt, there is clarity. Beneath the criticism, there is wisdom. Beneath the fear, there is strength. You will learn how to replace automatic self-attack with intentional self-leadership. You will practice speaking to yourself with honesty instead of hostility. You will begin building an inner relationship based on respect, trust, and encouragement. This is not a quick fix. Rewiring the inner voice takes patience and consistency. But every step forward matters. Every moment of awareness weakens the old patterns and strengthens new ones. By the end of this book, the goal is not for self-doubt to disappear forever. The goal is for it to lose its authority. To become a signal you can interpret, rather than a command you must follow. The goal is for your inner voice to work with you, not against you. You are not here because you are failing at life. You are here because you are ready to take responsibility for how you speak to yourself. And that choice alone is powerful. This is the beginning of a new conversation with yourself. One rooted in clarity instead of fear. In growth instead of self-judgment. In truth instead of old, borrowed beliefs. And it starts now. Chapter 1: Understanding where self-doubt comes from. Before you can change the voice in your head, you must understand where it came from. Not to blame yourself. Not to relive the past. But to finally see clearly and compassionately that self-doubt did not appear because you are flawed. It appeared because you are human, shaped by experience, memory, and survival. Self-doubt is not born overnight. It is built quietly, over time, through moments that seem small in isolation but powerful in repetition. A comment that lingered longer than it should have. A failure that felt public and painful. A comparison that made you feel behind. A time you tried and it didn't work. These moments didn't just pass through you. They left impressions. And the mind, always trying to make sense of the world, turned those impressions into conclusions. As a child, your understanding of yourself was shaped largely by reflection. You learned who you were by how others responded to you. Praise felt like safety. Criticism felt like danger. Approval felt like belonging. Rejection felt like isolation. Over time, your mind learned to associate certain behaviors with acceptance and others with risk. This was not weakness. It was adaptation. The brain's primary job is not happiness. It is survival. And survival depends on prediction. Your mind learned to scan for what might go wrong, so you could avoid pain in the future. It learned to replay mistakes, so they wouldn't happen again. It learned to anticipate judgment, so you wouldn't be caught off guard. What began as protection slowly transformed into a pattern of self-questioning. Past failures intensified this pattern. When something mattered deeply and didn't work out, the emotional weight carved a deeper groove. The brain remembered not just what happened, but how it felt. Embarrassment, disappointment, loss. The mind connected those feelings to action itself, and began whispering warnings whenever you considered trying again. Criticism, especially when repeated or delivered by people whose opinions mattered to you, added another layer. Even when the criticism was well-intentioned, the emotional impact lingered. The mind does not store words neutrally. It stores meaning. And often the meaning it extracts is harsher than what was intended. Comparison magnified everything. Watching others succeed where you struggled created stories that felt personal. The mind filled in gaps with assumptions. They're better. I'm behind. Something is wrong with me. Over time, these assumptions stopped feeling like thoughts and started feeling like facts. This is how the inner critic forms. Not as an enemy, but as a misguided guardian. It believes it is helping you by keeping expectations low, by urging caution, by pointing out flaws before someone else does. It believes that if it keeps you small, you'll stay safe. This is why negative thoughts feel sticky. The brain is wired to remember threats more vividly than rewards. It clings to negative experiences because it believes they are important for survival. Positive moments feel good, but negative ones feel urgent. The mind treats them as lessons that must not be forgotten. Understanding this changes everything. Because once you see self-doubt as a learned response rather than a personal truth, its power begins to soften. You stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "What happened that taught me to think this way?" Your inner critic is not an accurate narrator of your worth. It is a recorder of past experiences, filtered through fear. It speaks in absolutes because fear prefers certainty. It exaggerates risk because caution feels safer than hope. It repeats old conclusions because familiarity feels more trustworthy than the unknown. But conditioned does not mean correct. The origin of your self-doubt is not proof of your limitations. It is evidence of your sensitivity, your awareness, your desire to belong and succeed. These traits are not weaknesses. They are strengths that were never properly guided. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who hears them. You are not the voice that criticizes. You are the awareness that notices it. This distinction matters. Because identity is not formed by what passes through your mind, but by what you choose to believe, challenge, and act upon. Separating the origin of the voice from who you are creates space. In that space, curiosity replaces judgment. Compassion replaces shame. Power replaces helplessness. You begin to see that the voice in your head is not a verdict. It is a habit. Habits can be changed. This does not mean the voice will disappear overnight. It means you will stop confusing its presence with truth. You will stop assuming that because a thought appears, it must be obeyed. You will learn to pause, to question, to observe without immediately reacting. Awareness is the first real shift. When you understand where self-doubt comes from, you stop taking it personally. You stop fighting yourself. You stop trying to silence the voice with force, and begin to understand it with clarity. And clarity weakens fear. You may begin to notice that the inner critic sounds younger than you are. That it uses language rooted in old experiences. That it reacts to situations that no longer pose the same risk. This realization is not meant to embarrass you. It is meant to free you. You are no longer the person you were when those patterns formed. You have more information now. More resilience. More choice. The voice has not caught up yet. But it can. This chapter is not about fixing anything. It is about seeing clearly. About recognizing that self-doubt is not a personal flaw, but a learned response shaped by survival, memory, and emotion. And once something is learned, it can be unlearned. Once something is conditioned, it can be retrained. As you move forward, remember this: the presence of self-doubt does not mean you are incapable. It means you are standing at the edge of growth. Awareness is the doorway. And you have already stepped through it. This is where change begins. Chapter 2: Identifying the Patterns of Negative Self-Talk. There is a quiet shift that happens the moment you begin to name what has been controlling you. What once felt overwhelming starts to feel understandable. What once felt personal starts to feel patterned. And what once felt powerful begins to lose its grip. This is the power of identification. When you can see something clearly, it no longer gets to hide in the shadows of your mind. Negative self-talk often feels chaotic, as if it appears randomly and attacks without warning. But when you slow down and listen closely, you begin to notice that the voice is not creative. It repeats itself. It follows familiar scripts. It uses the same phrases, the same tone, the same conclusions over and over again. These are patterns, not truths. One of the most common patterns is catastrophizing. This is when the mind jumps to the worst possible outcome and treats it as inevitable. A small mistake becomes a disaster. A delay becomes failure. A moment of uncertainty becomes proof that everything is falling apart. Catastrophizing feels urgent and convincing because it is rooted in fear. The mind believes that if it prepares you for the worst, it can protect you from surprise. But instead of protecting you, it traps you in anticipation of pain that may never arrive. Another powerful pattern is comparison. The inner voice scans the world and measures your progress against others. It notices what they have that you don't. It highlights how far ahead they seem. It ignores context, timing, and unseen struggles. Comparison is rarely fair, but it feels factual because it uses visible evidence. What it does not show you is the full picture. It only shows you enough to make you doubt yourself. Harsh self-judgment often follows close behind. This pattern speaks in absolutes. It uses words like always and never. It labels instead of describes. Instead of saying this didn't work, it says, you're not capable. Instead of saying you made a mistake, it says, you are a mistake. Over time, this language becomes internalized. The voice stops criticizing actions and starts attacking identity. These patterns repeat so often that they begin to feel automatic. And repetition is how the brain builds habits. The mind strengthens the neural pathways it uses most frequently. Thoughts that are repeated become easier to access. They show up faster, louder, with less resistance. This is not because they are true, but because they are familiar. The brain prefers efficiency. It saves energy by returning to known paths. This is why negative self-talk can feel instant, like a reflex. You don't choose it consciously. It appears before you have time to question it. And because it appears so quickly, it feels authoritative. But speed does not equal accuracy. Learning to identify these patterns is not about stopping thoughts from appearing. It is about noticing them without immediately believing them. Awareness creates a pause. And in that pause, choice becomes possible. One of the most important skills you will develop is noticing the tone of your inner voice. Not just what it says, but how it says it. Is it harsh or gentle? Urgent or calm? Shaming or curious? The tone matters because it reveals intention. A supportive voice guides. A critical voice controls. Many people feel ashamed when they notice how cruel their inner dialogue can be. They wonder why they would speak to themselves in ways they would never speak to someone they care about. But shame is not the answer. Shame only strengthens the pattern. Awareness without judgment weakens it. Your inner voice learned its language from somewhere. It absorbed tones, phrases, and reactions from past experiences. When you hear it clearly, you may recognize echoes of other voices. Teachers, parents, authority figures, moments of embarrassment. This recognition is not about blame. It is about understanding. When you begin to listen without shame, something powerful happens. The voice loses its disguise. It stops feeling like a command and starts sounding like a habit. You realize that these thoughts are not spontaneous insights. They are rehearsed lines. And rehearsed lines can be rewritten. You are not required to agree with every thought you have. You are not obligated to follow every internal warning. The mind produces thousands of thoughts a day. Many of them are outdated, exaggerated, or irrelevant. Learning to observe them without reacting immediately is a skill. And like any skill, it improves with practice. At first, noticing patterns may feel uncomfortable. You may realize how often you doubt yourself. How quickly you jump to conclusions. How familiar the critical tone feels. This awareness can feel heavy. But it is not meant to discourage you. It is meant to empower you. Because you cannot change what you cannot see. Each time you notice a pattern, you weaken its automatic hold. Each time you name it, you bring it into the light. And patterns do not survive long in the light of awareness. This chapter is not asking you to fix your inner voice yet. That comes later. Right now, the work is simply to listen. To notice. To recognize repetition without reacting with shame or frustration. The goal is not to become hyper-aware or self-critical about your thoughts. The goal is to become familiar with the landscape of your mind. To understand its habits. To see where fear tends to speak the loudest. When you can say, this is catastrophizing, or this is comparison, or this is harsh self-judgment, you create distance. That distance is freedom. It allows you to respond instead of react. To choose clarity instead of defaulting to fear. You are not trying to silence the voice yet. You are learning its patterns. And in doing so, you are reclaiming your authority. Because the moment you can name the enemy, it no longer controls you from the shadows. It stands in front of you, visible and understandable. And that is where your power begins. This awareness is not the end of the journey. It is the foundation. And it is strong enough to hold everything that comes next. Chapter 3: Why your inner critic feels so convincing. There is a reason the voice of self-doubt often feels louder, heavier, and more believable than the voice of encouragement. It is not because it is wiser. It is not because it knows something you do not. It is because it speaks the language of emotion, and emotion carries weight. Negative thoughts often feel more real than positive ones, because they are tied to survival. Long before confidence mattered, safety did. Long before self-belief was celebrated, avoiding danger was essential. The human brain evolved to pay attention to threat, not potential. And in the modern world, that ancient wiring hasn't disappeared. It has simply adapted. Fear gives thoughts urgency. When a thought is fueled by fear, it arrives with intensity. It demands attention. It feels important. Encouraging thoughts, on the other hand, often arrive quietly. They suggest rather than insist. They don't scream. And because of that, they can feel optional, while fear feels mandatory. This is why a single negative comment can outweigh 10 positive ones. Why one mistake can overshadow years of effort. Why self-doubt can feel more convincing than evidence of your capability. Emotion amplifies perception. And the inner critic knows exactly how to use that amplification. Fear is one of its strongest allies. Fear does not argue calmly. It speaks in extremes. It tells you what might go wrong and presents it as what will go wrong. It does not offer probabilities. It offers certainty. The mind believes certainty is safer than ambiguity, even when that certainty is false. Ego also plays a role. The ego's job is to protect identity. When you try something new or meaningful, the ego senses risk. Failure would challenge how you see yourself. Rejection would bruise your sense of worth. So the ego steps in early, trying to stop the threat before it happens. It disguises its warnings as logic, but underneath is fear of being diminished. Past pain deepens the effect. When you have been hurt before, the mind remembers. Emotional memory is powerful. It does not fade easily. The inner critic uses those memories as proof. It says, "Last time you tried it hurt. Let's not do that again." It does not acknowledge growth, change, or context. It focuses only on avoiding repetition of pain. This combination of fear, ego, and memory gives the inner critic emotional authority. It sounds confident. It sounds urgent. It sounds familiar. And familiarity creates trust, even when it shouldn't. But here is the truth that changes everything: feelings are not facts. Feelings are signals. They are information about what your nervous system is experiencing, not accurate assessments of reality. A feeling can tell you that something is uncomfortable, without telling you that it is dangerous. It can tell you that you are afraid, without telling you that you are incapable. The inner critic blurs this distinction. It presents feelings as conclusions. It says, "You feel uncertain, so you must not be ready." It says, "You feel afraid, so this must be wrong." But discomfort is not a verdict. Fear is not a prophecy. Confidence is often misunderstood. Many people believe that confident individuals never doubt themselves. That they move forward without hesitation. That they are immune to fear. This is a myth. Confidence is not the absence of doubt. It is the willingness to move forward despite it. Even the most capable people experience self-doubt. The difference is not that they don't hear the voice. The difference is that they don't let it decide for them. They understand that doubt is a feeling, not a command. When you believe that confidence means never doubting yourself, every moment of uncertainty feels like failure. You assume that if doubt is present, you must be doing something wrong. This belief gives the inner critic even more power. It convinces you that doubt disqualifies you. In reality, doubt often appears precisely because you are stepping into something meaningful. It shows up at the edge of growth. It signals that you care. It does not mean you should stop. It means you are stretching. The inner critic feels convincing because it speaks early. It often arrives before conscious thought. It feels instinctive. But instinct is not always accurate. It is shaped by past conditions, not present reality. Learning to recognize this is not about arguing with every negative thought. It is about understanding its source. When you know why the voice feels so real, you stop mistaking intensity for truth. You begin to pause, to ask questions, to notice when fear is driving the narrative, to separate emotional reaction from rational assessment. This pause creates space, and space creates choice. Over time, you learn to listen differently. You stop asking, "Is this thought loud?" and start asking, "Is this thought useful?" You stop assuming that because something feels uncomfortable, it must be avoided. You begin to recognize that growth often feels exactly like this. Your inner critic does not disappear when you understand it, but it loses its authority. It stops being the final decision maker. It becomes one voice among many, not the loudest one. Confidence grows not when doubt disappears, but when you stop letting doubt define you. When you act anyway. When you gather evidence through experience. When you realize that you are capable of handling discomfort, uncertainty, and even failure. The inner critic may always try to sound convincing. But now you know its tricks. You understand its language. You recognize its emotional leverage. And that understanding is power. You are not weak because the voice feels real. You are becoming stronger because you are learning how to hear it without obeying it. This is not about silencing yourself. It is about reclaiming leadership over your inner world. And once you do that, confidence stops being something you wait for. It becomes something you practice. This is how the illusion breaks. And this is how your voice begins to change. Chapter 4: Separating your thoughts from your identity. One of the most freeing realizations you will ever have is this: you are not your thoughts. They feel intimate. They speak in your voice. They comment on your life, as if they are narrating truth. But they are not you. They are experiences happening within you. For most of your life, you have likely assumed that every thought you have deserves your attention. That if a thought appears, it must mean something. That if it feels strong, it must be important. This assumption gives thoughts power they were never meant to have. It turns passing mental events into personal verdicts. But thoughts are not commands. They are not instructions. They are not identity statements. They are mental activity. And mental activity can be observed. The moment you stop automatically obeying your thoughts is the moment you begin to reclaim yourself. Observation creates distance. Distance creates choice. And choice is where freedom lives. Imagine standing on the side of a road, watching cars pass by. You notice them, but you don't chase them. You don't jump in front of them. You simply observe. Thoughts can be treated the same way. They pass through your awareness, sometimes quickly, sometimes lingering. You don't need to stop them. You don't need to follow them. You can watch them come and go. This shift feels subtle, but its impact is profound. When you observe a thought, instead of identifying with it, its emotional charge softens. The voice loses urgency. It stops feeling like a command and starts sounding like commentary. Self-doubt thrives on identification. It gains power when you believe that what you think is who you are. I think I'm not good enough quietly becomes, I am not good enough. This transformation happens automatically when there is no space between thought and self. Creating that space is not about suppression. It is about recognition. Recognition that a thought is something you have, not something you are. Detachment weakens self-doubt because it removes the fuel of belief. Self-doubt does not require your agreement to exist, but it does require your agreement to control you. When you stop agreeing automatically, its influence fades. This does not mean you become passive or disconnected. It means you become discerning. You choose which thoughts deserve your attention and which ones do not. You stop letting every mental whisper dictate your behavior. Thoughts are shaped by memory, emotion, habit, and fear. They are influenced by hunger, fatigue, stress, and mood. They change with context. They contradict each other. Yet when you identify with them, they feel absolute. Learning to see thoughts as mental events brings balance. You stop treating them as ultimate truths and start treating them as signals that need interpretation. This is especially important during moments of stress. Under pressure, the mind produces more negative thoughts. Not because reality has changed, but because the nervous system is activated. The inner critic gets louder. The tone gets sharper. Without detachment, this feels overwhelming. With detachment, it becomes manageable. You may still hear the thought that says, "You're not ready." But instead of obeying it, you can observe it and ask, "Is this fear or fact?" You may still hear the thought that says, "You always mess things up." But instead of believing it, you can notice the pattern and let it pass. This does not require forcing positive thoughts. It requires honesty. It requires acknowledging the presence of the thought, without granting it authority. Over time, this practice changes your relationship with your mind. You stop being controlled by the loudest voice. You start leading from awareness. Your identity becomes anchored in something deeper than momentary thoughts. It becomes rooted in values, actions, and self-respect. You realize that who you are is not defined by what crosses your mind on a difficult day. This separation is not cold or distant. It is compassionate. It allows you to respond to yourself with clarity, instead of criticism. You stop fighting your mind and start guiding it. Thoughts are suggestions, not instructions. They offer perspectives, not commands. When you remember this, you regain sovereignty over your inner world. The more you practice observing instead of obeying, the easier it becomes. Thoughts lose their urgency. The inner critic loses its edge. You begin to experience moments of quiet, where awareness feels spacious and grounded. This is not about emptying the mind. It is about no longer being dominated by it. As you move forward, remember this: you are the awareness that hears the thought, not the thought itself. That awareness is steady. It is capable. It is not threatened by passing mental noise. And from that place, you can choose differently. You can act with intention instead of fear. You can speak to yourself with respect. You can let thoughts come and go, without letting them define you. This is where true inner freedom begins. Chapter 5: Challenging the Lies Without Fighting Yourself. There is a way to change your inner dialogue without turning against yourself. A way to grow without bullying your mind into submission. A way to challenge doubt without becoming harsh, aggressive, or exhausting. That way begins with compassion. Many people try to overcome negative thoughts by attacking them. They argue. They shout back mentally. They force affirmations. They tell themselves to just think positive or stop being weak. And when that doesn't work, they feel even more defeated. Not because they failed, but because they chose the wrong strategy. Fighting yourself only strengthens the battle. When you attack your own thoughts, you reinforce the belief that something inside you is broken or dangerous. The inner critic feeds on this conflict. It thrives when you treat yourself like an enemy. Compassionate correction is different. It does not deny the presence of negative thoughts. It does not shame them away. It meets them with calm curiosity. It asks questions instead of issuing commands. The goal is not to silence the mind, but to guide it. Negative thoughts often feel urgent. They demand agreement. They insist that something is wrong right now. Responding aggressively only matches their intensity. Responding calmly changes the tone of the conversation. When a self-critical thought arises, instead of saying "that's stupid" or "stop thinking like that," you can ask, "Is this thought helpful?" or "What is this thought trying to protect me from?" These questions create space. They shift you from reaction to reflection. Self-inquiry is powerful because it invites clarity. It replaces accusation with understanding. When you ask questions, the mind slows down. It stops shouting long enough for you to see the gaps in its logic. Many negative thoughts are exaggerations. They take one moment and stretch it into a permanent conclusion. They take uncertainty and turn it into inevitability. When you question them gently, they often soften on their own. Reframing is not about pretending everything is fine. It is about seeing the full picture. Forced positivity feels fake because it ignores reality. Compassionate reframing acknowledges difficulty while removing unnecessary cruelty. Instead of saying, "I'm terrible at this," reframing might sound like, "I'm learning and this part is challenging." Instead of, "I always fail," it might become, "This didn't work the way I hoped, but it doesn't define everything." These shifts are subtle, but they change the emotional impact dramatically. The language you use with yourself matters. Tone matters. Harshness triggers defensiveness. Compassion invites cooperation. When you speak to yourself with respect, your mind becomes more open to change. Building self-trust begins here. Every time you respond to doubt with clarity instead of criticism, you show yourself that you are a safe place to land. You teach your nervous system that mistakes will be met with understanding, not punishment. This changes behavior. When you trust that you won't attack yourself for trying, you become more willing to take risks. When you know that failure won't result in self-abandonment, you become braver. Self-trust is not built by always being right. It is built by being supportive when you are wrong. You are not trying to eliminate doubt. You are learning how to relate to it differently. Doubt does not disappear through force. It dissolves through understanding. Imagine the inner critic as a frightened part of you, trying to keep you safe using outdated strategies. When you meet it with aggression, it becomes louder. When you meet it with calm authority, it begins to listen. This does not mean agreeing with everything it says. It means acknowledging its presence, without surrendering control. Clarity is firm but kind. It says, "I hear the concern but I don't agree with the conclusion." It says, "Thank you for trying to protect me, but I'm choosing a different response." Over time, this approach rewires your inner world. The tone of your thoughts begins to shift. The voice softens. The urgency fades. You start to feel less attacked by your own mind. This is not weakness. It is strength without violence. You do not need to dominate yourself to grow. You need to lead yourself. And leadership begins with trust, with patience, with the willingness to pause and choose clarity over cruelty. As you practice challenging lies without fighting yourself, you will notice something powerful. The inner critic no longer feels like an enemy. It becomes information. And information can be evaluated, refined, and released. You are not here to win a war against your mind. You are here to build a partnership with it. And that partnership, built on compassion and clarity, will carry you further than force ever could. Chapter 6: Rewriting the Inner Dialogue. Every thought you repeat becomes a path your mind learns to walk more easily. Every word you speak to yourself leaves an imprint. Over time, these imprints become habits, and habits become the tone of your inner life. This is why rewriting the inner dialogue is not about one powerful moment, but about many small, intentional choices made consistently. The mind is not fixed. It is adaptive. It is constantly learning from repetition. This is true, whether the repetition is helpful or harmful. If you have spent years speaking to yourself with doubt, criticism, or impatience, those patterns feel natural. Not because they are right, but because they are familiar. New thought patterns are formed the same way old ones were formed. Through repetition, emotional reinforcement, and consistency. The difference now is that you are choosing consciously, instead of absorbing unconsciously. At first, speaking to yourself in a supportive way may feel awkward, even uncomfortable. You may notice resistance. The inner critic may push back, saying this feels fake or undeserved. This is normal. You are introducing a new pattern into a system that is used to the old one. Change often feels unnatural before it feels normal. Choosing language that builds you does not mean lying to yourself. It means being accurate without being cruel. It means describing reality without attaching unnecessary judgment. It means replacing statements that break you down with ones that keep you steady. Instead of attacking yourself for struggling, you acknowledge the struggle and offer encouragement. Instead of shaming yourself for fear, you recognize fear as part of growth. Instead of labeling yourself as incapable, you focus on effort, learning, and progress. The way you speak to yourself sets the emotional climate of your life. Harsh language creates tension. Supportive language creates safety. And safety is where growth happens. Repetition matters because the brain strengthens what it practices. When you consistently respond to challenges with encouragement instead of attack, the mind learns a new default. When you repeatedly choose language that respects your humanity, that language becomes automatic. This does not happen overnight. The old voice may still appear. But now, it is no longer the only voice. You are building a new one alongside it. Think about how you speak to someone you care about when they are struggling. You don't minimize their pain. You don't call them weak. You don't tell them they should be better by now. You listen. You reassure. You remind them of their strengths. You help them see the situation clearly, without crushing their spirit. That same approach belongs to you. Practicing supportive self-talk is an act of self-respect. It signals that you are worthy of patience and care, even when you fall short of your expectations. Especially then. Consistency is more important than perfection. You will forget sometimes. You will slip back into old language. That does not erase progress. Each time you notice and gently redirect, you strengthen the new pattern. Over time, the inner dialogue changes. The tone softens. The words become steadier. The mind becomes less reactive and more responsive. You begin to feel supported from within. This does not make you complacent. It makes you resilient. When you are no longer fighting yourself, your energy becomes available for growth. Rewriting the inner dialogue is not about controlling every thought. It is about choosing how you respond. It is about deciding which voice gets the final word. You are learning to become your own steady presence. Your own encouragement. Your own guide. And as this voice grows stronger, the old one fades into the background. Not because it was forced out, but because it is no longer needed. This is how the inner dialogue transforms. Not through pressure, but through practice. Not through perfection, but through persistence. You are teaching your mind a new way to speak. And in doing so, you are creating a relationship with yourself that supports growth, confidence, and peace. This is not a small change. It is a foundational one. And it will shape everything that follows. Chapter 7: Building Confidence Through Evidence, Not Affirmations. Confidence is often misunderstood. Many people believe it is something you think your way into. That if you repeat the right phrases, convince yourself hard enough, or silence every doubt, confidence will appear. But confidence does not grow in the mind alone. It grows in the body, through experience. Through evidence. Through action taken again and again. Positive thinking can inspire you, but it cannot replace proof. Affirmations can soothe you, but they cannot override lived experience. Your inner voice listens most closely to what you do, not just what you say. This is why confidence built only on words feels fragile, while confidence built on action feels steady. After periods of self-doubt, your mind doesn't need more promises. It needs evidence. It needs to see that you can show up, follow through, and handle discomfort. It needs proof that you are capable, not because everything went perfectly, but because you stayed engaged even when it didn't. Confidence grows from doing hard things imperfectly. It grows from trying when fear is present. It grows from taking steps before you feel ready, and realizing that readiness often comes after movement. Small wins matter more than dramatic breakthroughs. The inner voice is retrained through repetition, not intensity. When you accomplish something small that you once avoided, your mind takes notice. When you keep a promise to yourself, even a minor one, trust begins to rebuild. Each follow-through becomes a piece of evidence. Each completed action whispers to your inner critic, "I can handle this." Over time, those whispers become a steady voice. This is why starting small is powerful. Big goals can feel overwhelming when confidence is low. They trigger fear and avoidance. Small actions, on the other hand, feel doable. And doable actions create momentum. When you consistently do what you say you will do, you send a clear message to yourself: you are reliable. This message builds self-respect. And self-respect is the foundation of confidence. Confidence is not arrogance. It is not pretending you know everything. It is trusting that you can learn, adapt, and recover. That trust is earned through experience. Collecting proof of capability changes how you see yourself. Instead of focusing on what you haven't done, you begin to notice what you have handled. Instead of replaying failures, you start remembering resilience. Your inner voice begins to reference real moments instead of imagined fears. It says, "You've done this before." It says, "You've survived worse." It says, "You can take the next step." Follow-through reinforces self-belief because it closes the gap between intention and action. When you act on your values, even in small ways, you align with yourself. That alignment creates inner stability. Confidence does not come from being perfect. It comes from being consistent. From returning to yourself again and again. There will be days when motivation is low. Days when doubt resurfaces. Confidence built on evidence does not disappear on those days. It reminds you that feelings change, but capability remains. You do not need to feel confident to act. Acting is how confidence is built. This chapter invites you to stop waiting for belief and start creating it. Through action. Through consistency. Through honoring your word to yourself. As you move forward, remember this: every small step counts. Every effort matters. Every follow-through strengthens the voice that says, "I trust myself." And that voice, grounded in evidence, becomes unshakable. This is how confidence is built. Quietly. Steadily. One action at a time. Chapter 8: Quieting the Voice During Stress and Failure. There are moments when the inner voice grows louder. Moments when pressure tightens your chest, when a mistake lands heavier than expected, when a setback feels like proof of every fear you've ever had. In these moments, self-doubt does not knock politely. It rushes in. It speaks quickly. It demands attention. And if you are not prepared, it can pull you into a spiral before you realize what's happening. This is not a sign that you are regressing. It is not proof that all your progress has vanished. It is simply the nervous system doing what it has always done under stress, searching for control. Stress narrows perception. It shortens patience. It makes the mind reactive instead of reflective. When pressure rises, the brain shifts into protection mode. Old patterns resurface because they are familiar. The inner critic returns because it believes urgency will keep you safe. Understanding this changes how you respond. Instead of asking, "Why am I thinking like this again?" you begin asking, "What is my system reacting to right now?" That question alone introduces calm. Self-doubt spikes during stress because the mind associates uncertainty with danger. When something goes wrong, the inner voice rushes to explain it. It wants closure. It wants certainty. And the fastest explanation it can offer is self-blame. But speed does not equal truth. The first step in quieting the voice during these moments is grounding. Grounding brings you out of the imagined future and back into the present moment. The inner critic lives in anticipation and replay. It predicts what might happen next and rehashes what already went wrong. Calm lives in now. When you pause, even briefly, you interrupt the spiral. You give your nervous system a signal that you are not under immediate threat. This does not require elaborate techniques. It requires presence. Slowing your breath. Noticing your body. Feeling your feet on the ground. These small acts shift the mind from reaction to regulation. Responding calmly does not mean suppressing emotion. It means allowing emotion without letting it take over leadership. You can feel disappointment without letting it define you. You can feel fear without letting it decide for you. The inner voice often becomes harsh after mistakes. It speaks in absolutes. It tells you that you should have known better. That this proves something about you. That you've undone your progress. But progress is not erased by a single moment. Growth is not fragile like that. Recovery matters more than avoidance. Everyone experiences setbacks. What changes over time is how quickly you recover and how gently you return to yourself. When negative inner talk appears, the goal is not to silence it immediately. The goal is to reduce its intensity and shorten its duration. Instead of spiraling for hours or days, you learn to notice, pause, and redirect. This is a skill. And like all skills, it improves with practice. You begin by acknowledging the thought without agreeing with it. You might say internally, "This is stress talking," or "This is the old pattern showing up." Naming it creates distance. Distance creates space. Then you respond with steadiness. Not forced positivity. Not harsh correction. Steadiness. You remind yourself that mistakes are part of the process. That setbacks are information, not verdicts. That you have recovered before, and you can recover again. The inner voice quiets when it no longer feels like it has to shout to be heard. When you respond with calm authority, it loses urgency. One of the most important things to remember during failure is that emotion exaggerates permanence. Pain tells you that this moment will last forever. That you are back at the beginning. That nothing has changed. This is not true. It is the nervous system reacting to threat. Progress does not disappear because you struggled. Strength does not vanish because you fell. Awareness does not reset because you had a hard day. What you have built remains, even when it is temporarily obscured by emotion. Learning to recover faster means learning to return to the present instead of replaying the past. It means resisting the urge to punish yourself as a form of control. It means choosing regulation over rumination. You are allowed to pause. You are allowed to feel. You are allowed to reset without starting over. The voice in your head may still appear during pressure. That does not mean you have failed at this work. It means you are human. The difference now is that you are no longer powerless. You recognize the pattern. You know how to ground. You know how to respond. And each time you recover more quickly, confidence grows. Not the loud kind. The quiet kind. The kind that trusts your ability to handle difficulty. Setbacks do not erase progress. They reveal it. They show you how far you've come in how you respond. They show you what you've learned. They show you your capacity to return to yourself. This chapter is not about eliminating stress or avoiding failure. It is about staying grounded when it matters most. About choosing presence over panic. About remembering that your worth is not measured in perfect moments, but in your willingness to come back to yourself again and again. The voice will rise. And you will meet it with calm. That is strength. and it is already within you. Chapter 9: Making Peace with Imperfection. Perfection is an illusion. It is a promise that can never be kept, a standard that shifts as soon as you reach it, a moving target designed to keep you chasing, never arriving. Yet for many, perfection feels necessary. It feels like the currency of worth. The louder the inner critic, the more it whispers that to be enough, you must be flawless, precise, unshakable, and beyond reproach. And when that impossible standard is inevitably unmet, self-doubt rises, filling the space with guilt, shame, and frustration. Perfectionism is the quiet thief of joy. It steals satisfaction from your successes, no matter how small. It magnifies mistakes, replaying them endlessly until they feel like proof of incompetence. It binds you to comparison because someone else's version of enough will always seem easier, faster, or more natural. It convinces you that to pause, to rest, or to accept yourself is weakness, as if being human is a failure in itself. But here's the truth: imperfection is not failure. It is existence. It is proof of courage, creativity, and engagement in life. Imperfection is not something to fix, it is something to honor. Every scar, every stumble, every hesitation, every flaw carries meaning. They are evidence that you have tried, that you have risked, that you have grown. They are proof that you are alive and learning. Perfectionism fuels self-doubt because it attaches worth to outcome rather than effort. When you equate success with being flawless, every mistake feels catastrophic. Every delay feels like incompetence. Every misstep confirms the inner narrative that you are not enough. The mind clings to this story because it fears judgment, exposure, and disappointment. And the voice that criticizes you, insisting on perfection, has been reinforced over years, even decades. It is familiar. It feels necessary. It feels authoritative. But authority does not equal truth. It simply equals persistence. The first step in making peace with imperfection is awareness. Begin to notice where perfectionism creeps into your thinking. Notice the language you use: I should, I must, I can't afford to. Notice the emotional patterns: tension, anxiety, procrastination, fear of judgment. Notice the behaviors: over-preparing, avoiding risk, repeating tasks endlessly, or refusing to start until conditions feel perfect. Naming these patterns reduces their power. Once a behavior is observed, it is no longer automatic. Once a thought is noticed, it can be met with choice. The second step is permission. Give yourself permission to be human. Permission to make mistakes, to learn slowly, to speak imperfectly, to create and fail, to experience life without meeting impossible standards. This is not a free pass to stop growing. It is a conscious release of the fantasy that worth depends on flawlessness. It is the act of placing your humanity above judgment. Growth thrives in imperfection. Trying, failing, and adjusting creates resilience. Learning, experimenting, and stumbling builds skill. Struggling, reflecting, and persisting develops insight. When you stop equating every flaw with failure, you create a space where learning is valued over image. Effort becomes more meaningful than outcome. Progress matters more than perfection. Comparison is a trap closely linked to perfectionism. Looking at someone else's curated version of success and measuring yourself against it fuels dissatisfaction. You see only results, never the struggle behind them. You see only achievement, not the countless imperfect steps taken to reach it. Letting go of perfection allows you to focus on your own path, your own growth, and your own process, without being derailed by the illusion of what others appear to have achieved effortlessly. Acceptance without complacency is key. Making peace with imperfection does not mean resigning yourself to stagnation or mediocrity. It means acknowledging where you are now, embracing your current abilities and limitations, and then moving forward with honesty and courage. Acceptance brings clarity. It allows you to see where to focus your energy, what is within your control and what is irrelevant. From this clarity, improvement becomes natural, deliberate, and grounded in reality, rather than in fear of inadequacy. The inner voice that demands perfection often exaggerates the stakes of imperfection. It amplifies mistakes, imagines consequences, and predicts judgment. But the world rarely reacts as dramatically as the mind anticipates. Errors rarely lead to catastrophe. Missteps rarely define character. By noticing this exaggeration, you weaken the voice's authority. You begin to separate fear from fact, expectation from reality, and imagined failure from actual learning. One powerful approach is reframing mistakes as signals rather than verdicts. When a project does not go perfectly, instead of thinking, "I failed," try thinking, "This is information. What can I learn?" When a conversation goes awkwardly, instead of thinking, "I embarrass myself," consider, "I now know what to do differently next time." This simple shift transforms errors from threats into guidance. It reduces anxiety and rebuilds trust in yourself. Another crucial aspect of making peace with imperfection is slowing down. Perfectionism thrives on rushing, overthinking, and multitasking to cover every possible flaw before it appears. Slowing down allows you to notice your work, your choices, and your emotions with greater clarity. Slowing down allows you to respond thoughtfully rather than react defensively. Slowing down allows imperfection to be present without judgment. It is also essential to practice self-compassion actively. Speak to yourself as you would to someone you care about. If a friend made a mistake, you would not tell them they are worthless or unworthy. You would acknowledge the error, offer support, and encourage them to try again. Treat yourself the same way. Speak gently. Validate your effort. Encourage persistence. Offer reassurance that your worth is inherent, not conditional. Practicing gratitude for imperfection can be transformative. Imperfection is where creativity blooms. Imperfection is where courage appears. Imperfection is where authenticity lives. The cracks in your life are not defects, they are doorways to insight, connection, and growth. Gratitude for imperfection does not negate the desire to improve. It simply shifts your energy from shame to engagement, from fear to exploration, from judgment to curiosity. As you make peace with imperfection, notice the liberation it brings. Anxiety about outcomes begins to lessen. Hesitation diminishes. You stop holding yourself hostage to an ideal that does not exist. You begin to take action from a place of authenticity rather than performance. You experience freedom in creation, freedom in expression, freedom in being fully human. This freedom strengthens resilience. When perfection is no longer the barometer of your worth, you can navigate setbacks with perspective. Failures become temporary, challenges become opportunities, and criticism becomes information rather than punishment. Your inner voice softens. Self-doubt loses urgency. Confidence emerges naturally from engagement, rather than from meeting an impossible ideal. In the end, making peace with imperfection is not a single act. It is a practice, a way of relating to yourself, a continuous choice to honor humanity over fantasy. Each day you allow yourself to exist, to try, to err, and to persist, you reinforce this mindset. Each day you respond to self-doubt with compassion rather than criticism, you weaken the power of perfectionism. Each day you choose growth over comparison, you reclaim your freedom. Perfectionism may always whisper in the background. The inner critic may occasionally rise to insist that you must be flawless. That is human. What changes is your response. You no longer obey every demand. You no longer measure your worth by an impossible standard. You no longer let fear dictate your decisions. You move forward anchored in acceptance, guided by effort, fueled by curiosity, and strengthened by resilience. You act, create, learn, and grow, not because you are perfect, but because you are capable, courageous, and real. Making peace with imperfection is ultimately an act of liberation. It frees you from the endless cycle of self-judgment. It releases the need for external validation tied to flawless performance. It allows you to live fully, embrace risk, experience joy, and pursue growth without fear of being anything less than human. This is the essence of freedom, knowing that your value is inherent, that mistakes are temporary, and that imperfection is not just allowed, but necessary for a meaningful, authentic life. Chapter 10: Living with an Inner Voice that Supports You. The most profound transformation comes not in moments of crisis, but in the everyday choices you make when nothing urgent is at stake. It is in the quiet mornings when your mind races through old worries, in the small interactions where your words could be harsh or gentle, in the decisions that seem minor but build the architecture of your life. Living with an inner voice that supports you is not a one-time achievement. It is a continuous practice, a way of navigating the world that strengthens your mental resilience, sharpens your emotional clarity, and expands the scope of what you believe is possible for yourself. You have spent chapters learning to observe your thoughts, to challenge the inner critic, to separate yourself from mental patterns, and to rewire your inner dialogue with consistency, clarity, and compassion. Chapter by chapter, you have built the foundation of a mind that does not automatically obey fear, doubt, or judgment. Now, the task is to integrate these habits into the fabric of your daily life, so that the supportive voice becomes your default, not a fleeting ally that appears only during conscious effort, but a natural part of how you experience the world. Integration begins with awareness, but not obsessive awareness. You do not need to monitor every passing thought, or scrutinize every feeling. Awareness is simply the ability to notice, to pause, and to recognize when your inner critic or your supportive voice is speaking. It is the capacity to see without immediately reacting, to respond with intention rather than reflex. Over time, this awareness becomes effortless. You no longer need to fight every negative thought. You simply note it and let it pass, allowing your new inner voice to guide your response. Living with a supportive inner voice means leading yourself with clarity. It is the conscious decision to speak to yourself in ways that reinforce your values, your worth, and your potential. When you encounter challenges, your inner voice reminds you of your capabilities, not your limitations. When you face uncertainty, it encourages exploration rather than retreat. When you make mistakes, it offers guidance rather than punishment. This is not about ignoring reality or inflating your abilities. It is about providing a voice that is constructive, grounded, and aligned with truth rather than fear. Emotional maturity grows from this practice. When your inner voice is supportive, you develop the capacity to hold difficult emotions without being controlled by them. You recognize that anxiety, anger, or doubt are signals, not verdicts. You learn to respond rather than react, to pause rather than explode, and to choose words and actions that reflect your best self. Emotional regulation becomes second nature because your internal dialogue is a steady source of guidance and reassurance, rather than criticism and chaos. Maintaining this supportive voice requires patience and consistency. Old patterns may resurface, especially under stress or when facing unexpected challenges. This is normal. The mind defaults to familiar pathways, and your inner critic is persistent. The key is not perfection in response, but persistence in practice. Each time you choose clarity over criticism, each time you pause instead of reacting, each time you guide yourself with compassion instead of judgment, you reinforce the new pathways in your brain. Over time, these choices accumulate, and the supportive voice strengthens, eventually becoming the default mode of operation. A supportive inner voice also transforms your decisions. When doubt no longer dominates your mind, you make choices from a place of confidence and clarity. Opportunities that once seemed too risky now feel like invitations for growth. Challenges that once caused paralysis now feel like puzzles to solve. This shift does not mean that fear disappears, it never does, but fear becomes a signal to prepare, not a reason to stop. You learn to listen to caution without letting it dictate your life, and to move forward even when uncertainty is present. Relationships are transformed as well. A supportive inner voice allows you to interact with others from a place of authenticity rather than insecurity. You no longer project your self-doubt onto others or seek validation to feel worthy. Instead, you communicate clearly, set boundaries without guilt, and respond to conflict with presence rather than defensiveness. Your inner stability creates external stability, and the quality of your relationships improves because you are no longer guided by fear or self-criticism. Confidence, at its deepest level, is also a product of this integration. Confidence is not a state of arrogance or perfection. It is the quiet knowledge that you can handle whatever comes your way. It is the trust that your inner voice will guide you when challenges arise. It is the understanding that mistakes are temporary and do not diminish your worth. Confidence grows from the repeated experience of listening to yourself, acting with integrity, and witnessing your own resilience. Living with a supportive inner voice is not about constant effort or rigid rules. It is about establishing a relationship with yourself that honors your humanity and your potential. It is about recognizing that life will always present stress, setbacks, and uncertainty, but you can navigate these with a voice that supports rather than sabotages you. It is about making self-leadership your default, so that even in moments of pressure you remain grounded, clear, and intentional. Practical integration requires daily rituals. Perhaps it begins with moments of reflection in the morning, setting an intention to guide your thoughts and actions consciously. Perhaps it includes pauses throughout the day to check in with yourself, to notice when negative patterns are arising, and to redirect with kindness. Perhaps it ends with gratitude or acknowledgement in the evening, recognizing where your supportive inner voice guided you effectively, and where further practice is needed. These moments may be brief, but their cumulative effect is profound. Over time, your inner voice shapes more than your thoughts. It shapes your behavior, your relationships, your resilience, and your sense of purpose. It becomes a compass, quietly pointing you toward actions aligned with your values and goals. It reminds you that you are capable, that setbacks are temporary, and that your worth is inherent, not contingent on performance or external approval. The voice that once criticized and undermined now guides and reinforces, creating a foundation for lifelong mental strength. The freedom that comes from a supportive inner voice is subtle, but transformative. It is not flashy or dramatic. It does not guarantee the absence of fear, mistakes, or setbacks. What it does guarantee is the ability to meet life with steadiness, clarity, and courage. It is the knowledge that you are your own advocate, your own guide, your own source of resilience. It is the confidence that no matter what arises, you have the internal resources to respond effectively and with integrity. Living with a supportive inner voice also allows you to embrace imperfection without fear. When the inner critic no longer dominates, you can make decisions, take risks, and create without needing to be flawless. You can pursue growth over comparison, curiosity over certainty, and presence over anxiety. You learn to honor the process, value effort, and see mistakes as opportunities rather than failures. Your inner dialogue no longer punishes, it informs, encourages, and aligns with your deeper values. This chapter, and indeed this entire journey, culminates in the understanding that your inner voice is not an enemy to defeat, but an ally to cultivate. It is a source of guidance, strength, and clarity. It is not something that appears once you achieve perfection or eliminate doubt. It is something you build, nurture, and integrate into daily life through consistent, compassionate practice. The more you invest in this relationship, the more resilient, confident, and grounded you become. Imagine waking each day with a voice that supports rather than sabotages. A voice that listens, informs, and guides. A voice that speaks with clarity, not fear. A voice that celebrates effort, encourages persistence, and reinforces your inherent worth. This is not a distant fantasy. It is the result of the intentional work you have practiced throughout this book. Each chapter, each step, each moment of reflection and redirection has laid the groundwork for this transformation. Your inner voice now becomes a partner in decision-making. It helps you navigate uncertainty without panic. It helps you respond to mistakes without self-condemnation. It helps you act in alignment with your values, rather than reactionary fear. It reminds you that setbacks are temporary, growth is ongoing, and your worth is constant. This is the power of integration, the internalization of a supportive mindset that shapes every aspect of your experience. As you move forward, remember that this is a lifelong practice. Life will continue to present challenges, disappointments, and uncertainties. The inner critic may still appear, old patterns may resurface, and stress may temporarily amplify doubt. That is human. What matters is the relationship you have built with your supportive inner voice. You now have a foundation of awareness, compassion, and clarity that allows you to navigate these moments with steadiness rather than reactivity. By living with an inner voice that supports you, you cultivate long-term mental resilience. You build a mind that is flexible yet anchored, confident yet humble, aware yet calm. You become someone who can face life with courage, clarity, and purpose, not because fear has disappeared, but because you have trained yourself to act with intention and self-trust regardless of fear. Your inner voice shapes your reality. It influences how you see yourself, how you respond to others, and how you engage with the world. A supportive inner voice changes the way you make decisions, the way you handle setbacks, the way you communicate, and the way you experience life. It becomes the foundation for confidence, emotional maturity, and personal freedom. Living with a supportive inner voice is not a destination, it is a way of being. It is the culmination of awareness, practice, and self-leadership. It is the embodiment of everything you have learned in this book, observing your thoughts without attachment, challenging lies without fighting yourself, rewriting dialogue with care, building confidence through evidence, quieting your mind in stress, making peace with imperfection, and choosing growth over judgment. When you integrate these practices fully, your inner voice is no longer a battlefield or a source of anxiety. It becomes a sanctuary. It becomes a guide. It becomes a partner. And in that partnership, you discover the profound freedom, clarity, and strength that comes from living fully aligned with your true self. Conclusion: you were never broken. All your life, you may have believed that there was something wrong with you. That the voice in your head was a verdict rather than a signal, that self-doubt was proof of weakness, and that imperfection was a flaw too large to overlook. You may have thought that feeling uncertain, anxious, or inadequate meant you were broken. But now, at the close of this journey, I want you to recognize something profoundly liberating: you were never broken. You were learning. You were growing. You were navigating a world that taught you to doubt, and now you have the tools to guide yourself with clarity, compassion, and resilience. Awareness is power. Each chapter of this book has been designed to help you reclaim authority over your inner life, to transform what once felt like a liability into a source of strength. You have learned to notice the thoughts that arise without automatically obeying them, to separate yourself from mental patterns, to challenge the lies without fighting yourself, and to replace fear and self-criticism with a voice that supports, encourages, and guides. You have begun to understand that self-doubt is not a sentence but a signal, a message that your mind is asking for clarity, perspective, or action. This distinction is profound. For decades, you may have internalized every critical thought as proof of inadequacy. You may have measured your worth by performance, perfection, or external validation. But now you understand that the voice in your head is not you. It is a system that reacts to experience, conditioned by fear, past events, and habit. And systems can be retrained. You have begun that retraining. You have started choosing awareness over automatic reaction, clarity over chaos, compassion over attack, and evidence over empty affirmation. Consider how far you have come. You no longer see mistakes as catastrophic or flaws as terminal. You no longer automatically personalize failure or let fear dictate your choices. You have learned to observe your thoughts, respond with intentionality, and create mental pathways that reinforce resilience. You have discovered that confidence is not about never doubting yourself, but about taking action despite doubt. You have learned that imperfection is not weakness but humanity. And you have begun to integrate a supportive inner voice that guides, reassures, and strengthens you even in moments of uncertainty. Progress is ongoing, and that is part of the beauty of this work. You will encounter challenges, setbacks, and moments when the old critical patterns resurface. That is natural. Growth is not linear, and mastery is not perfect. What matters is that you now have the tools to respond differently. You have the awareness to notice when self-doubt arises. You have the understanding to reframe critical thoughts. You have the ability to cultivate a voice that is constructive, steady, and aligned with your values. And each time you practice these skills, the new pathways in your mind strengthen, becoming the default over time. The voice in your head can now become your ally, rather than your adversary. It can serve as a source of guidance instead of judgment, as a source of courage instead of fear, as a source of clarity instead of confusion. You can listen to it, learn from it, and yet remain grounded in the truth of your capabilities and worth. The inner dialogue that once sabotaged you can now inform you, challenge you productively, and even celebrate your efforts and growth. This transformation is profound, because it does more than reduce self-criticism or quiet fear. It changes how you experience life. It changes how you make decisions, how you engage with relationships, how you pursue goals, and how you recover from setbacks. When your inner voice is supportive, you no longer seek validation externally to feel whole. You no longer measure yourself against impossible standards. You navigate challenges with steadiness, act with intention, and respond to adversity with resilience. Imagine facing a difficult situation and noticing your mind start to spiral into worry. In the past, this might have triggered panic, avoidance, or harsh self-criticism. Now you pause. You observe. You recognize the thought as a signal, not a verdict. You ask yourself what information it carries, and what action is helpful. You respond from clarity rather than fear. You move forward knowing that your worth is constant, that mistakes do not define you, and that your efforts matter more than perfection. This is freedom. This is the liberation that comes from mastering the inner voice. It does not make life easier. Life will still challenge you, test you, and push you to your limits. But it makes you stronger. It makes you steadier. It makes you resilient. And it allows you to engage with life fully, rather than from a place of fear or self-doubt. You are not defined by the moments when the voice in your head was harsh, judgmental, or critical. You are defined by how you respond, how you learn, and how you reclaim authority over your own mind. Every time you pause, observe, and guide your thoughts, you reinforce the truth that you are capable, worthy, and resilient. Every act of self-leadership, no matter how small, is evidence that you are not broken, you are rebuilding, learning and growing. In the coming days, weeks and years, you will continue to practice. There will be moments of triumph and moments of struggle. But now you know how to meet them. You have cultivated awareness that allows you to see the difference between fear and fact. You have built tools to reframe critical thoughts with clarity and compassion. You have learned to ground yourself during stress and to recover quickly when self-doubt arises. You have embraced imperfection and understood that growth is more important than perfection. The ultimate lesson is this: you were never broken. Every doubt, every harsh thought, every moment of fear was not a sentence but a signpost. They pointed you toward awareness, toward choice, and toward growth. You now know how to lead the voice in your head instead of being led by it. You now know that your inner dialogue can be a source of strength, guidance and calm. You now have the tools to live fully, engage confidently, and navigate life with clarity and resilience. As you close this book, take a deep breath and let this truth sink in. You are not your thoughts. You are not your doubts. You are not your mistakes. You are the awareness that observes, the choice that responds, and the presence that acts with integrity. Your inner voice is a powerful ally, and you have learned how to lead it with care, courage, and consistency. Remember, mastery is a practice, not a destination. The voice in your head will continue to speak. Old patterns may arise. Challenges will test you. But you now know how to respond with clarity, compassion, and strength. You are capable of guiding your mind, nurturing your inner voice, and living with intention. You were never broken. You were learning, growing, and evolving all along. And now, with the tools, awareness, and practice you have cultivated, you can live with an inner voice that supports, guides, and empowers you every day. You are whole. You are capable. You are resilient. You are free. And most importantly, you are the leader of your own mind. Thank you for reading this book. I hope you enjoyed it. Please remember to leave us a review. TM Light. Disclaimer. This book was created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. While every effort was made to ensure the accuracy and relevance of the content, readers should note that this cannot be considered professional advice. Readers are encouraged to apply their own judgment and consult experts where needed.